Hi, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is FAIZ bin Muhammad ROZI. So for this slide, our group member will be present our court case for the presentation of the court case RES559 for SR Nur Halil Ismail. So this is our group members. One is a SAUR anak PETRUS, second OlIVIA CHELENGGA anak SALIMAN, and third me Muhammad FAIZ bin Muhammad ROZI, and Muhammad RES559 bin SANI, and the last one is Muhammad AIMAN HAZIQ bin Muhammad ROSIL. So our group member will be present three cases. We have first case is Orchard Circle Sendirian Berhad, V pentadbir tanah daerah Hulu Langat and ORS. For second, Cik Sum Cik Mat, V pentadbir tanah daerah Kerian, and the last one case is pentadbir tanah daerah Johor V Nusantara Daya Sendirian Berhad. So first case, we move to the first case, and I pass to my first presenter, Nur Izwan. Thank you.
Assalamualaikum. My name is Muhammad RES559 bin SANI. For my part, I will explain the case of Orchard Circle Sendirian Berhad versus pentadbir tanah daerah Hulu Langat. So firstly, I will explain the facts of the case. For this case, the appellants, which is the Orchard Circle, was the registered owner of two parcels of land which were compulsory acquired by the state authority. On 10 December 2001, Form D of the Land Acquisition Act was issued to compulsory acquire the land for the purpose of the building the Kajang Traffic Dispersal Highway or SAUR Highway. On 24 December 2002, an inquiry before the land administrator was held in respect of the acquisition of land. Orchard Circle was awarded a nominal sum of RM1 as award for the compulsory acquisition. Reason being that a portion of land had already been surrendered to the state authority. Form G, which is the written award of compensation, and Form H, notice of award and offer of compensations, dated on 24 December 2002, were issued in relation to the first land inquiry, which is the first award. So next part, I will explain the issue of this case. In this bill, the question of law to be decided were whether, according to Section 8(4) of the Land Acquisitions Act, a declaration in Form D lapsed and stopped having any effect when an award of the land acquisition was made within 2 years period, but was later overturned. Next, causing a new award to be made outside of the 2-year period, and another issue that is whether, according to res judicata and estoppel, the declaration in Form D that will be otherwise have lapsed and also stop having any effects. For the last part of this case, I will explain the decisions that made by the judge. So for this part will be break up into 3 sections, which is the decision of the High Court, decision of the Court of Appeal, and decision of Federal Court. So firstly, I will explain the decision of the High Court for this case. So it stated that the High Court agreed with the second request for judicial review and said that Form D was only valid for 2 years from the day it was published in the Gazette. It threw out Form D from December 10, 2001, Form G and H 20 April 2012, and all proceeding to come after them. So next, for the decision of Court of Appeal, it stated that Court of Appeal upheld the appeal of the respondents, among others, because the first award given by the land acquisition on December 24, 2002, which was well within 2 years time limit from the date of Form D on December 10, 2001. The purpose of Section A bracket 4 of the land acquisition will be lost if a strict interpretation was used, since the land administrator has no control over the legal challenge brought by the litigants. Next, I will explain the decisions of the Federal Court, which is the final part of this case. So, the Federal Court stated that Federal Court agreed with that the Court of Appeal had decided. The Federal Court said that the Court of Appeal way of doing this was right and did not need to be changed. In this case, the Federal Court ruled that the Form D had not expired, and the order from the High Court on December 10, 2010 did not invalidate the Form D. The Federal Court also said the first land inquiry took place within 2 years of the date on Form D. So Form D is still very useful up until the second land inquiry. So the Federal Court did not answer the question, saying that the way it was asked did not come from the facts of the case or from the decision of the High Court on December 10, 2010. When making decision, the Federal Court decided that it could not be said that the land administrator in the second land inquiry had broken Section A bracket 4 of the land acquisition by making the second award after the 2-year limit. Since the second land inquiry was only meant to replace the first land inquiry, the court never said that issue of getting the land, taking possession of the land, and Form D were invalid. The court also said the goal was to make sure the landowner whose land was taken for public was quickly got paid for it, and the addition Section 8 bracket 4 of the land acquisition was aligned with the Federal Court decisions in Pembangunan Hasil Tanah Daerah Barat Daya, Balik Pulau, Pulau Pinang versus Ongaiki case. The Federal Court was convinced by the fact that the state authority had not only taken formal possessions of the land when the Form K was sent out February 2023 as required by the Section 22 of the land acquisitions, but the land had also become their property. There was no way for the land to go back to the landowner in the Land Acquisition Act. In two cases, Satyendra Prasad Jain versus State of the Uttar Pradesh, and through the LRS versus State of the Uttar Pradesh, the Federal Court agreed with how the Supreme Court of India interpreted Section 11A of the India Land Acquisition Act. This was because Section 11A of the India Land Acquisition Act is very similar to Section A bracket 4 of the Land Acquisition. So Federal Court decided that Section 8 bracket 4 of the Land Acquisition did not apply when the land acquisition process was over and the state authority already owned the land. Instead, it applies to case where legal action has been taken or been taken within 2 years, even if the land purchase had not been finished. Federal Court thought it was silly to say that the land had gone back to Orchard Circle because the first request for the judicial review was not decided for 7 years after it was filed. By that time, the SIG highway project was done, so it can't be true that Orchard Circle still owned the land by the highway was built. The federal court thought that the answer to the appeal depends on how Section A, Bracket 4 of the land acquisition was interpreted. It did not agree with the argument that Section 8, Bracket 4 should be taken face value because first, it did not take into account by the second land inquiry happened after 2 years limit, and second, literal and natural interpretations of Section 8, Bracket 4 of the land acquisition in this case will make no sense. In the end, the federal court followed the Section 17A of the Interpretation Acts of 1948 and 1967 and gave more weight to the purposeful approach to interpreting the sections. So that's all from me for this part of this case.
My name is Vanessa Petrus ADAN, and I will explain about facts and issue for cases Cisom Cemat versus Pentabeh Tanah Daerah Krian. Fact for these cases is, before the land repossession case, the land was agricultural land for the cultivation of oil palm tree. After the reclaiming of land, as much as 70% of the CSI's land has been involved in reclaiming land for the purpose of building a Swiss station project, which has left as much as 0.9241 hectare of land. Issue for these cases is a portion of the applicant's land, which is in Perak district of Krian, was forcibly obtained to carry out a project to build a switching stations. The applicant received Rm 25,326 for a portion of lost land and Rm 41,775.75 for injurious affection. The applicant lodged an objection according to Section 38, Subsection 1 of the Land Acquisition Act 1960 because she was not satisfied with her award. The applicant was not adequately compensated for the damage suffered by remaining portion of the land. The compensation did not accurately reflect the market value of the land. Besides that, the applicant did not receive any compensation to cover the cost of the earth filling work necessary to build a new house on the remaining land, and did not receive the compensation for the cost of moving. A claim for compensation for crop damage caused by flood caused by excavation work on the project was also made. The applicant valuer argued that the market value of land should be determined based on evidence of transaction in the neighborhood as of the date of compulsory acquisition. Based on the evidence of this comparable and after making the necessary adjustment, the applicant valuer contended that the land value should be Rm 3.40 per square feet, while the government valuer suggested Rm 1.25 per square feet.
My name is OlIVIA and I will explain the next part, which is the court decision on the Cisom Cemat versus Pentabeh Tanah Daerah Krian. The first decision decided by the court was the amount of compensation to be awarded should be the amount decided upon by two assessors. Where the assessor decision differed, the judge, having regard for each assessor opinion, may elect to concur with the decision of one of the assessors, and the amount of the compensation to be awarded should be the amount decided upon by that assessor. Any decision that made under this section is final, and no further appeal to the higher court is permitted. After the court decision was made, both assessors finally agreed that 1 ringgit per square feet is a reasonable market value for the land. Because both assessors, who were the expert on the market value of the land, has reached a consensus that There was no reason to consider the matter further than to simply comply with the calculated market value. As a result, the award for partial land loss was increased from 25,000 to 30,000 ringgit. They also agreed that the total diminution in value of the remaining land, which represented the compensation required to reinstate the land, would be 70%, or 113,000 ringgit Malaysia. The applicant valuer observed that the flood caused by the land administrator contractor excavation work had affected approximately 60 oil palm trees that were yielding fresh fruit. Although the applicant valuer estimated the cost of reinstating the crop at 18,000 ringgit Malaysia, which is 300 ringgit per tree, but no evidence was presented as to how the valuer arrived at the 300 ringgit per tree figures. Given that the tree was already 23 years old, which is the average food-producing lifespan of oil palm trees, a sum of 9,000 ringgit, which is 150 ringgit per tree, would be a more appropriate award for the crop damage. Section 48 of AG allowed for interest to be awarded. Thus, the land administrator was ordered to pay the applicant interest at 8% per annum on the increased compensation sum of 98,000 in Malaysia from the day he took possession of the land to the date of payment to the applicant.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Muhammad HAZIQ bin ROSIL. My matric number is 2021148359. Today I would like to present my study case for RES559. For my study case is pentadbiran tanah daerah Johor v Nusantara Daya Sdn Bhd. I can summary for this case. The Land Acquisition Act 1960 was used to purchase the respondent land. Based on a professional value evaluation, the respondent saw compensation equal to the scheduled land fair market value. The respondent additionally assessed a loss of revenue claim due to the scheduled land loss of use as a parking lot. Based on the government value recommendation, the land administrator dismissed the respondent claim for lost revenue and gave him a smaller compensation than he had requested. The amount of compensation was enhanced by the High Court with the aid of assessor. The respondent failed and appealed with the Court of Appeal because he was dissatisfied with the enhanced compensation. The appellant contested the appeal and argued in the Court of Appeal that it should be dismissed because the respondent was just seeking to increase the amount of compensation. According to the appellant, such an appeal was forbidden by the proviso to Section 49, subsection 1 of Act 486. The Court of Appeal ruled inter alia that the grounds stated by the respondent on appeal were legal problems. As a result of the Federal Court ruling in Semenyih Jaya Sdn Bhd v Pentadbiran Tanah Hulu Langat and another case for Semenyih Jaya. For issue of pentadbiran tanah daerah Johor v Nusantara Daya Sdn Bhd is the Federal Court ruling in Semenyih Jaya Sdn Bhd v Pentadbiran Tanah Hulu Langat and another case was not barred by the provision to Section 49, subsection 1 of Act 486. The Court of Appeal granted the respondent appeal and raised the order of compensation. The appellant failed and appealed with the Federal Court. The principal objection of the appellant was that the respondent appeal at the Court of Appeal was defective since it was prohibited by the provision to Section 49, subsection 1 of Act 486. And for decision made by the judge, this appeal put the purpose, intent and scope of Section 49 of the Land Acquisition Act 1960, particularly the provision to Section 49 subsection 1 squarely in the spotlight. The question at hand is whether the provision bar an appeal from the Court of Appeal to this court. The Court of Appeal addressed this matter as a preliminary matter, but before ruling the merit of the appeal, it rendered a negative decision. The main argument in this appeal revolved around these threefold issue. The pertinent details are taken from the High Court and Court of Appeal respective ground for judgment. According to the High Court, the respondent had triggered Section 38 subsection 1 of the Land Acquisition Act 1960 after becoming frustrated with the amount of compensation granted by the land administrator for the procurement of its land known as Lot 46200 GRN 460222 mungkin Johor Bahru, daerah Johor Bahru. The 4,464 square meter scheduled land was purchased for pembinaan loji rawatan air kumbahan di hulu sungai Sejet di Mukim Bandar Johor Bahru, daerah Johor Bahru untuk Jabatan Perdana Menteri in bawah Perenggan 3 subsection 1A Akta Pengambilan Tanah 1960 according to the acquisition purpose. A total of 60,516,800 ringgit had been given as compensation for the acquisition by the land administrator. According to the respondent, the scheduled land was worth 28,830,074.40 cents at fair market value of 6,458 ringgit 35 cents per square meter. A private value review was provided as evidence. See the appeal record, page 84 to 121. The respondent also asserted an 40,200 loss of income due to the scheduled land loss of use as a parking lot for 67 vehicles. The government value had provided for comparable sales in his valuation of the scheduled land, and the land administrator had relied on those suggestions in making his decision. See for valuation report at page 122 to 174 record of appeal. The government value had suggested a market value of 3,700 per square meter after making the appropriate adjustment to reflect the difference between the scheduled land and the comparable sales. The claim for lost income made by the respondent was denied by the land administrator. The government value had suggested a market value 3,700 per square meter after making the requisite adjustment to reflect difference between the scheduled land and comparable sales. The claim for lost income made by the respondent was denied by the land administrator. After determining that this display the fair market value of the scheduled land, the High Court increased the compensation from 19,516,800 ringgit to 19,026,907 ringgit on August 9, 2018. With the help of assessors to support its request for increased compensation at the High Court. The respondent had depended on the valuation report created by private value. In this valuation report, the private appraisers recommend for comparable sales. The High Court evaluated each comparable and reject it, and the ground for that rejection are outlined at paragraph 6 through 23 of the decision. Additionally, the appellant provide for comparable via the government value, the assessors and the land judge concurred that comparable number 1 was the best comparable but turned down comparable 2, 3 and 4. See paragraph 16 to 23 for the reason why this decision was made as well. After correction, the High Court acting as land referral court raised the market value of the scheduled land to 90,026,907 ringgit or an additional sum of 2,500 2,510,107 ringgit as payment for the purchase of the scheduled land plus interest. Altogether, those modifications result in a 30% reduction, 5% for location, 10% for access, 5% for lawyer and 10% for size. For the conclusion, the High Court decided against making any change to reflect potential development because it believed that this had previously been taken into account when the value of 5,799 ringgit 44 cents per square meter was determined. This compensation amount did not satisfy the respondent any less. That is why it had appeared.